two of my favorite writers, Annie Zaidi and Isabel Santa Rita Vaz. Uh, I'll give a brief introduction. We're going to have another exclusive book launch, The Comeback, written by Annie Zaidi. And that will happen probably in the next few minutes. I'll give a brief introduction, but I'm sure both of you will introduce yourself much more holistically. Annie is an English language writer. Her novel Prelude to a Riot won the Tata Literature Live Awards for Book of the Year in 2020. In 2019, she won the Nine Dots Prize for her work Bread, Cement, Cactus. And in 2018, she won the Hindu Playwright Award for her play Untitled. Her non-fiction debut, a collection of essays, Known Turf, Bantering with Bandits and Other True Tales, was shortlisted for the Vodafone Crossword Book Award in 2010. She has also written several books of poetry and a novella called Gulab. My favorite reading of hers is titled Unbound, and it's a collection of feminist writing or women's writing across the last 2,000 years, which shows that feminism was there in India much before, as long as India existed. Isabel is part of Goa Writers Group, one of the founding members, and she writes plays very popular in Goa, and I'm sure outside as well. And she runs the Mustard Seed Company. She also is a professor at Goa University. Was, okay. But I think that's a very brief introduction of Isabel, but there's too much to tell, really. Over to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gautami. You have made my job easier. You have already introduced Annie. This is Annie. We have been friends today. And we hadn't met before, but we've just met and we are good friends now. And one reason why, I'm not lying, truly, one reason why we are friends is that we love a common person whose name is theatre. We are both theatre lovers, and before we get started, before we even launch her book, I would like to thank all of you for being here post-lunch. Thank you, so many familiar and friendly faces. Thank you so much for being part of this wonderful book launch. Could you please?
Where's the book?
I would like to get in the honors. And all this, the chance that happened. Wow, like that with a little that come back.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Honey?
That's wrong.
You write so many different things. I was, amazed when I read all that Annie writes. I haven't read it all, but when I read about her experience as a journalist, she's written poetry, she's written short stories, she's written essays, she's written plays, prize-winning plays. What do you not write, Annie?
Advertising copy.
Anyway, it's fabulous. And do you write in many languages?
Not really. I write mainly in English. I have written plays in Hindi.
Somehow plays occur to me in Hindi sometimes. I hear them in my ear in Hindi, but no, I don't write in any other language. People here will know that theatre in Goa is very alive, you know. There is Konkani theatre. Every Saturday you open the papers and you see advertisements of theatre. And some of them have hundreds of shows. And I'm yellow with jealousy because they're so popular.
Start.
There's Marathi theatre as well, and some of it is fabulous. But I want to tell you a little story. We are storytellers, you see. Once I called a computer technician to do some work on my computer, and he did the work, and on his way out, he's laughing away. So I said, "What happened? Why are you laughing?" "I've never seen so many books in one room," he said. I said, "Why do you like books?" I said, "I'm a teacher, you know, and I also write." "You write? What do you write?" I said, "Plays." "In Hindi?" he said. I said, "No, in English." "There is theatre in English in Goa?" He couldn't believe it. And when I said yes, he was just too amazed. Sometimes, you know, these are small-time things that we do. But when we discover that somebody else loves the same stuff that we love, then there is a connection. Now, the only reason I am sitting here is that this novel is about theatre. And so I will ask Annie to tell us something about the comeback and maybe what inspired you to write it.
So this is a novel I wrote in a very short span of time. I wrote it over one summer. And I'm in the middle of doing my PhD, actually. I started it the process sort of between COVID, just in between that. And then as soon as the second wave ended, I left to do my PhD. And I was missing theatre so much. I was missing Bombay so much. Bombay is a very vibrant, like you were saying about Goa. There's theatre in at least 4 languages that I know of, possibly more. There's English, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, maybe even Konkani. I know Tamil people also do theatre there. So it's a vibrant scene. And I also know the scene because I've worked with some of those theatre companies. I've had some of my plays put on. So I know that world and I miss that world. I miss its energy. I miss the artistic things we take and give to each other, right? Every time you meet an author, you collaborate with them. You see how directors work. You see how the audition scenes work. How do they even make a living? I couldn't make a living as a playwright. I have to do 5 other things in order to write a play. I have to do 5 other things. And I know it's the same for actors and directors. Theatre is one thing they do for love. We don't do it for the money. We may or may not they may or may not break even on a show or a production. You know this, right? So we all do this because we're driven in some way. And I miss that sense of working from that place of drive, pure drive. Then, in the middle of my studies, I was missing theatre so much. There was an option to teach as a teaching assistant. Instead of novels, I chose to teach theatre because at least that kept my connection with theatre alive. And I was thinking about this. Why does it matter so much to me? Why can't I let go of this theatre thing and just focus on academics and, But then in the course of thinking all these thoughts, I remembered my own college days. I've dedicated the book to the girls with whom I started making theatre because I grew up without theatre. I grew up in a very small place. We had no live entertainment whatsoever. Once a year on New Year's Eve, one orchestra party would be called, and they would sing cheap imitations of Bollywood songs, and that's it. I saw my first live dance performance, I think, when I was already 15. The only theatre I knew was the theatre we made. We, in our small school, the teachers would help and they would say, okay, turn Cinderella into a play, turn something else into a play. We picked up our textbooks and picked out one act plays out of that and started performing them. And that was my training, really. And then in college, we found our own theatre group and we started putting plays on. And for a while, I thought this would be my life. It didn't. It didn't turn out that way, but I wanted to go to NST, and it was like this little bit of a dream in my head that went nowhere. But the Kira has never gone. And I wrote this wanting to recapture who I was, who I could have been, and who I'm not. I'm most definitely not the protagonist of my book, but I could have been. If I had kept acting, say, or kept directing, it could so easily have been me because I would have been forced to make the same compromises as the characters in my books too. So that led me to this. And for me, it was an act of great fun and also a way of capturing some of what it takes to make theatre, tell that story. So that's what The Comeback is about.
I suspect that a writer has a reader sitting in his or her head. When you write, perhaps you're writing for someone. A novel like this is a novel. So you're writing for a reader who will sit home and read it. And yet it is about theatre. And when you write for theatre, you write for a live audience. And you write for actors. How did this happen? Who did you write for, Annie?
I think I wrote for my friends, primarily those 18-year-old girls who were trying to make theatre in their small town, in their college, but also for my theatre friends. I know that they will read it with a lot of fun and they will see shades of themselves in it. They will recognize the industry patterns because in Bombay, actors can only exist on the intersection of film, television, and theatre. That's the only way that they can make a living. And the novel is also set in that way. But our artistic ambition is something else. Like professional ambition is one thing, artistic ambition is something else. And every artist has to deal with that, choose sometimes between professional ambition and artistic ambition. So I've written for those friends, I think. I think they will like it, or at least they will relate to it, even if they don't like it. Yeah.
Writing about theatre, in a way, involves knowing what an actor is, what a director is, what a live audience means. How did all this happen? It didn't happen overnight. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences of being a novelist and also your experiences of being a theatre lover and theatre artist?
Yeah, I'm glad. Does it work? No, that's fine. Yeah, okay, I'll take that one. I'm glad you used that phrase, theatre lover, because that is primarily what I am before I am anything else. Like I am a reader before I am a writer, I'm a theatre lover before I am a playwright or anything else. But it hasn't come overnight. My experience of, along with other girls, not me alone, but a bunch of us running a theatre club in college taught me a lot. Firstly, it taught me to work with people. As a novelist, you work on your own. You can afford to antagonize a lot of people. Theatre doesn't work like that. You have to work in a team. You have to also disappoint people. When your own friends audition, suppose I'm directing a play, even if it's a student play, your own friends are lining up to audition. They want the best parts. And you're going to have to say no to your best friends. And I know what that feels like. And then I've also, as a playwright, on the professional fringes of the professional theatre scene in Bombay, I've watched when auditions happen. I've watched careers go up go down. It gives me so much happiness even now when I see the theatre actors who in the early 20s were auditioning for my plays, and now I see them on TV and film. It gives me so much happiness. But I also see the ones who get a break and then they take a fall. Then suddenly they've disappeared after 2 years. They're not getting work anymore. They're struggling again, trying to make theatre again. So I've seen the cycles that happen. I've seen it over 20 years. The people I started out with are now middle-aged. So I see what happens to careers. And that's the novel is a response to all of that, to seeing people struggle, get old, but still be fired up with that ambition for their art.
I thought the title was very appropriate. The comeback. It's the comeback of theatre into the lives of a number of people. Is the novel entirely about the comeback of theatre, or is it also about friendship? Is it also about love? I thought this was a very pregnant kind of a title. I thought I would ask you about it.
Yeah, thanks. You're right. It is about those things. It is about coming back to your hometown. It is about bringing theatre back into your life. It's also about, I've used the word comeback in the sense that comeback also has somewhat ambiguous connotations where you want to hit back at someone and you get your own back. So it's also about getting your own back. This novel, very briefly, I'll tell for
Yes,
those who
please.
haven't read it. This is a story of friendship, primarily one of friendship and betrayal. My protagonist is telling his own story. His name is John Kay. He's an actor called John Kay. He struggled, and after 17 years, he's finally got a break in film. And he gives this interview. Once he gets his big break, he gives this interview where he reveals certain things about his college life that destroys the life of his best friend. And his best friend is not an actor. His best friend is a banker. And because it destroys his life, suddenly his friend has nowhere to go, doesn't have a job, doesn't have any, really, he's ashamed and humiliated publicly. And it's his best friend's name is Asghar, and about how Asghar gets back on his feet and how he gives up his friendship with John, but then how John is determined to win Asghar back as a friend and as a theatre collaborator. So that's the story, really. It's about getting your own back, but also about getting your friendship back.
No spoilers. I'm not going
yet,
to give away any secrets. But it's a novel that you can't put down. You know, I read it and I was so uplifted by theatre once again. Theatre is one of the arts, no, Annie? There are so many other arts. There's painting, there is drawing, there is singing, there's dancing. What attracts you to theatre?
Theatre is unlike anything else because it is a replicable and yet non-replicable art. A painting doesn't change depending on its context. If it starts raining here, the painting will not change color unless it's watercolor and the colors run. That's a separate matter. But you take a painting to via another painting, still the painting. People can interpret it in different ways. Similarly for a book, you read this book in Goa, somebody else will read it in Bombay. The book will be a book. A show is not like that. You do a show here in English, and if your audience is mainly, say, non-English speaking, or they don't even understand English, your play will fall flat. It won't work because you draw energy from the audience. You crack a joke, they have to laugh. They're not laughing, your joke's not working, your play's not working, right? Similarly with culture, certain things are funny in one culture, they're not funny in another culture, We've seen this. We see this over and over again. If you watch and make theatre, right? So you derive from the audience. And even as an audience member, I love going to the theatre because if something's happening here on stage, I'm sitting next to someone. If the other person laughs, my laugh is louder. if the other person starts to suddenly shiver, if it's a terrible scene, I feel that shiver and we feed off each other. That doesn't happen in any other art. Maybe a little bit in live concerts. Like, that's why people love going to rock concerts also, because you're feeding off the energy of the crowd. So I like that. And it is what makes it magical as well. It is also interesting because it's the only art you can improve. You do a show, you see what's wrong, you can fix it the next night. You can't fix a novel. It's out, it's out. So it is unique and it's human. It's so human. Everything that makes us human, our ephemerality, our flaws, our changeability. I love all of that. And I love how you can take a play, if the same character is being played by a young person or an old person, the meaning of the play changes. And I love that about it.
Do you act, Tony?
Only in college. I was a terrible actor, Isabel. You would throw me out of your places. Because, I have a big problem. I can't remember dialogues. I'll learn the thing, and if you and I are in conversation on stage, I'll start watching you act. And I'm thinking Isabel is doing such a fine job, but I'm not saying the dialogue I'm supposed to say. So then I said, okay, this is not for me. Better behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by theatre because it involves so many arts. There is somebody who writes a play. There's somebody quite different who interprets it and directs it. There are actors who have to become somebody that they are not. And you talk to an actor and they will tell you that they agonize to become somebody different. There is the person who designs the lights. Somebody else designs the sets. Somebody does makeup for you. Somebody designs the costumes. And some of the things that the novel tells you are so exciting about the experiments that one of the theatre persons starts undertaking on his own comeback to life, comeback to theatre, and how he uses space in a way that is totally exciting and unexpected. Tell us something about it.
Why don't I read out that
please
section?
do. Please do.
So, okay.
Listen.
Okay.
Into it.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the page. I should have marked it. No, okay. To get my glasses out.
We will have a question and answer session also, so please get ready with your questions.
So, my protagonist, Asghar, is gone back to his hometown called Mansa. The place is called Mansa. It's a small town in UP, fictional town. I've not based it on any real place. And Asghar is putting on a play here. It's called Banke. It's an adaptation of a Western play. He's done it in his own way. So this is John Kay coming back to watch Banke. Act 2 had been invited to Lights. Asghar hadn't even been trying to show his work in Delhi, but trusty old Professor Jha had invited himself to a rehearsal. Then he raved long and hard to anyone who would listen about the delicious blend of Eastern and Western dramatic traditions that were being forged in a Mufassal town, and what a pity it was there wasn't more support from the state, and how much of the metaphorical and literal space was being hogged by those whose only claim to artistic merit was their proximity to the literal and metaphorical seats of power. Eventually, grassroots KP was alerted. KP was still annoyed at Asghar for turning down his offer of a visiting fellowship at the academy, but he was also on the board of advisors for the Lights Festival of Drama. He made some calls to sponsors and rustled up a travel budget so that Banke could travel to enter the competition. Asghar thanked him nicely, but first, he insisted, KP should come to Basa and watch a full dress rehearsal. Only then would Act 2 accept any money. I want you to experience the play the way it is meant to be experienced. At the actual grassroots, you will be our guest and it will be an honor, he said. Intrigued, KP accepted and drove up from Delhi along with a couple of his colleagues at the academy. In Basa, they were welcomed with crisp samosas and jalebis, and then they were made to wait until sundown. The chosen venue for Banke was not the Apsara cinema but a wedding hall that occasionally hosted Ghazal nights. Asghar's adaptation of The Masquerade meant that the audience would be thrown smack into the drama of a typical North Indian wedding that sprawls over 3 days, starting with the Mehndi night and ending with the reception. He didn't even have to build a set or buy props. He used the same stage where brides and grooms usually sat, on fur velvet chairs, waiting to accept gifts and be photographed against flowery backdrops. Silk fabric screens were dropped to suggest homes and rooms. A musical band was handy. Veils and flowery seras served the same purpose that masks had done in the original text. There was even a proper romantic caper, full of color, chaos, and a singing, dancing courtesan. Before he had even finished watching the second act, Grassroots KP had offered to double the budget. You must do it exactly like this in Delhi, he kept saying. Exactly like this. Do not compromise on anything. 3 days later, Banke opened to a full house in Basa, with tickets going at 500 rupees each, inclusive of snacks. The audience had been encouraged to dress up as if they were guests at a wedding. Samosas and sweets, frothy cups of coffee were served during the 10-minute interval. The crowd never stopped laughing, and on popular demand, an extra show was scheduled midweek. It's up.
It's almost as if the location is a character. It influences whatever happens. The actors are touched by the space that they occupy. I don't know whether the actors in turn affect the space. They certainly affect the audience. Would you like to say something about your other forms of writing? Because you are a short story writer, you are an essayist, you have written for television and film. Is it different from writing a novel?
I haven't really written for television successfully. I kept trying, that never happened. So far, at least, it has not happened. I have written short films and I have made a documentary, but that's sort of independent venture.
Right.
It is different. It's very different. I think a novel, you're in complete control of a novel, more or less. I mean, if somebody agrees to publish it as it is, then it's your thing. It's completely your thing. With essays, to some degree, that can be true, but you are dependent on somebody commissioning an essay, somebody agreeing to publish it in a newspaper or magazine. It's very rare nowadays for you to just write whatever you want to write. You're responding to events. So say something has happened, then you write an essay about it and things. And you're limited by length. You can't go on and on and on in an essay. At some point, it stops being an essay and turns into something else. I write instinctively, but I think I'm very rarely in control of what I'm writing. Like when I started this, it's not like I decided I would write a novel. It was just that I feel like writing something. Let's begin and see where it goes.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I want to ask you a question. Just taking off from what I read before. I know that you do theatre in Goa, and I know you also play a lot with space, and that the needs of space and culture determine the kind of work you do. Why don't you tell me how you do that? How you make those decisions?
We are small time actually. I'm a member of a theatre group for very many years. This is our 38th year. And we do plays regularly. So when we began, we were quite orthodox. We would go and hire a hall, maybe in some Kala Academy or Institute Menezes Braganza. And all it left us with was a hole in the pocket. But then, as time went, we became more experimental. So we have performed here, there, elsewhere. We have gone to Perne and staged a play on the terrace of a school. We have gone to Donna Paula, to the jetty, and performed at 3 or 4 different levels with a live band playing for us. We have gone to the riverfront and done a small play and dramatized a poem of somebody who is on a wheelchair. What have we not done, really? Now, recently, what we do is we go to the houses of people. An NGO invited us, and we went. And the most exciting thing is that each of these venues gives you a different audience and a different reaction. So we've gone, the last play but one, we wrote about somebody whose statue is in a garden in Panjim, Francisque Luis Gomes, that people look at and know nothing about. So we wrote a little play called Anybody Home? By the way, this man's home is now in dust and ruins. So we staged the play in the village that he was from, in a college which is in the neighborhood. So there are no limits now. We go just anywhere. We have to know in advance, obviously, what kind of venue we are staging the play in, because the two are very deeply interconnected. So anything is open to us now, and it's more exciting this way. If you become very orthodox, you have to rent a hall, and according to their timings, sometimes they give us from 3 to 6, and then from 8 to 11. Absolutely unsuitable for us. So very easy, you book for 2 shows. 2 shows. That means double the cost. So now we've become clever. In our old age now, we do what we do because we want to do it, and we do it anywhere that it strikes us.
So see, this event was kind of fated because you are my Asghar Abbas. Effectively, yes, because this is exactly what Asghar does. He looks at the place, he looks at the town, he said, I'm going to work with what this town has. And so fantastic. I'm so glad that you are the person who is then in conversation about this.
And sometimes even the weather becomes an actor. At one point, we were doing a play called Katore Baji, which was in English, by the way, about a great Goan who was perhaps one of the first global citizens, Abe Faria. Again, there's a statue in the middle of Panjim, and a few people know about him, but not very many. So we were staging this place. It was a mini open-air auditorium, and the play was being staged in December. And it started raining. And we are there all ready, and we don't know what to do now. Is the audience going to get up and just go? But they didn't. In fact, they said to us, why don't you start? And the actors said, come on, let's do it. And they came, although it was raining, they started, and the rains were taught a lesson. They vanished. And our play went off pretty well. And this is a story that we remember.
It's an amazing story. And I think, one of the impulses that drove me to write this novel also is knowing that it's difficult. Making theatre is physically difficult. It is demanding on you. You have to be fit, firstly, in order to whatever. Like at one point, John Kay is asked to lose 5 kilos because he has to be able to climb and do ropes and things like that. And theatre artists are expected to do those things. And you can't afford to. It's not like films where you can do a cut and then an extra will come and do something for you. It's not like that. You are the thing, you are the whole thing. So you have to be able to inhabit the body that is necessary for the play. But you also have to be able to inhabit. If you don't mind, I'll read a very short section from towards the end.
Of course.
Which is John Kay trying to give an audition after all the shenanigans he's done. So this is after a lot of manipulation. John Kay is a bit of a manipulative guy. A lot of manipulation. He somehow managed to engineer things so that the play he wants to be in comes together. He knows the play is happening, but how to get himself cast in the play, that he cannot guarantee. So he has to go and audition for this friend who will not talk to him. So this is from the section that he goes and does the audition for. So remember, he's already a movie star, and to go to a small place and then audition, it's a bit of a ego hit for him, but he does it. And here is the section. One by one, they did their songs, their beats, their introductions. All eyes were on Asghar, searching for the tiniest spark of approval. But for a change, I found myself focused on the other actors. Name upon name, song upon song, flutes and bongos and dolls. One girl asked if she could show some dance moves instead of music. Another man said that he had learned Kalaripayattu and he was willing to teach the other actors his martial skills if he was picked. A jowly youth in a checked shirt was poring over a book, perhaps the text of the play. That was how I must have looked 19 years ago. Too thin arms, jeans that never really fit, sleeves rolled up to my elbows in an attempt to look as if I was serious enough. But failing this thing, I could walk away unscathed. During the break, Mullan paused before me with a tray loaded with cups of tea. Our eyes met. Her eyes told me she recognized me, that she was weighing me in the balance, and she wasn't exactly rooting for me. There would be rivals in New York too. Tall, strapping young men who could sing and dance and play 5 instruments while turning somersaults backwards. I drained my cup of tea and wished there was more, though my teeth were furry and my muscles were clamped with anxiety. Dare I go ask for another cup? No, it may seem as if I were asserting a right to something that wasn't yet mine. But my heart protested. It is mine by rights. I made this audition happen. The very existence of Act 2, Asghar's determination to make drama, his fierce rejection of the kind of ambition that made actors lose their conscience, it was all my doing. But now I was going to show him. I wasn't a mere climber or a creeper, a fluke or a flake. I'd show him. I was more than what he imagined.
Listen.
When my name was called out, I sensed a little frisson at the back of the room, followed by a hush. At least some of them knew who I was. I moved to the front of the room to face a little committee made up of Asghar, Shanti, and Chiku. I met their eyes in turn, smiled a small smile, cleared my throat. Just then something distracted me, a tinkle, a jangle, anklets, bangles. I didn't want to turn around to check whether it was real or just my mind playing tricks. I shut my eyes and took a deep breath to transport myself back to the concrete platform in a quadrangle outside a college building. Asghar, my best friend, sitting on his heels, laughing. I had failed to do a full cartwheel. Once he was done laughing, he had chided me. Why do you even want to do the cartwheel? Is the character a cartwheel or is he a man? I opened my eyes and began to introduce myself. My name is John Kazin. John K is my screen name. I'm turning 40 later this month. I live in Mumbai, but I grew up in Basa. I've acted in a couple of films, a few TV shows, a few stage productions too, but to be honest, I've done more lighting work than acting. Santi smiled encouragingly. The silence deepened. I thought I heard a rustle of organza behind me. Was I really losing my mind? A familiar voice, a whisper, scratching of pen and paper. No, I wasn't imagining it. Nazo must be here, putting her name down on the list. Rustle, rustle, tinkling bangles. Wondered if she was wearing a courtesan look again. Someone cleared his throat. I looked up and found Asghar staring at me. For a moment, I had forgotten what I was there for. Asghar cleared his throat again. Are you going to show us something? Do you have any musical ability? These were the first words he had addressed directly to me in 3.5 years. I could feel him chafing under my gaze. He wanted me to look away, to focus on someone else. Did he want me to fail? No, that wasn't it. He wanted something else. I'll stop here. You can find out the outcome of the audition when you read.
So beautiful. So beautiful. We have a little time. Would anybody like to ask questions? There are so many students. I'm sure some of you have experience of theater and some of you have experience of writing novels or short stories. Please do ask.
There's a girl.
Shoot. Right.
Hello, ma'am. So, as a writer, what would you like to tell young minds who would like to write in the future? What keeps you inspired, like throughout the journey? Because there are so many times when you start writing and then you lose touch with your own writing. What keeps you inspired? Especially when you're writing about something so complicated like theatre.
I think the need to make a living is a great motivator. Mostly that is my primary motivation for the last 20 years. For this novel, though, that wasn't my motivation. This, I think, I was just driven, like I said. I was missing theatre so badly. I wasn't writing new plays. I wasn't able to even watch plays, at least not in my own culture and context. And yes, I will say this. I think recently, this is the first time in my life that I've lived away from the country for more than a couple of months, and I think in the first year of my PhD was the first time I realized how much I missed the art scene back home. It wasn't just my friends. It's when you are making and watching theatre from within your own culture, the impact it has on you and the way you relate to it is so different, so much stronger. I was missing that. I can watch British theatre, American theatre. I can enjoy it. But what my theatre scene says in my language, and when I see people like me understanding the jokes, responding to it, that feeling, I think that maybe made me think about what would it be like to go back to your hometown and set up a theatre company there. So I let my mind go wild then.
If I could suggest, if it's a student who wants to
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, Annie, I would like to ask you, as a woman writer, what influenced your decision to choose a male protagonist? Did you ever consider having a female protagonist? Or was there a specific reason you thought a male protagonist would be more fitting with the story?
I don't know why. It could be because I think Because when I listen to a lot of podcasts and interviews with mostly with other writers, I have to confess, but sometimes with others also, like actors and whatever. And I've noticed a difference in the kind of interviews they give. The trigger for this story is this is an interview gone wrong, right? He gives an interview, he says too much. And I've noticed the slight difference in the public persona that male artists put out and female artists put out. Female artists will very rarely brag about mistakes made. If they've done something wrong with their friends, they will very rarely go out and boast about it in public. And I think men tend to do a bit of that. It adds to their swagger, their public, the little glow around who a person is. It's okay to be a bad boy, or to be no longer a bad boy, but talk about, in our young days, we used to go out and do this and we used to go out and do that. I've noticed that girls very rarely do that. There is, of course, some sense of need to protect yourself, but at least in our culture and country, there is also this awareness of the consequences for themselves or for other people. And I think maybe that was what it wouldn't work. Instinctively, I knew it won't work with the female protagonist because a woman would probably be forced to think about the consequences of what she's doing.
Hello. There is one question that I would like to answer. You asked Annie, what needs to be done to become a writer? Right. It doesn't happen. It
Of
doesn't
course.
fall.
I
like-
agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
You just write whatever you enjoy writing. In college, there is some program that's going to happen. Write for it. You can write a dialogue, you can write a little scene, you can write a short story and narrate it. Just write.
I back that up. Even if you don't do it, even if you don't do it for a living, even if you have other jobs, etc., the discipline of writing has to be there. I agree with Isabel that.
And it's exciting. It's not some boring stuff that you sit there to torture yourself with. You write it because it's exciting. And if you read it out to somebody, to a friend maybe, or a sibling or somebody, you get feedback and it's good. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. Yes, please.
Hello. A question to both. Who are your favorite playwrights or theatrists? And man, since you have written so much, you've done essays, plays, in another book now, I just want to ask, how do you cope with the writer's block? As you have encouraged us to write, and so I write, but sometimes I'm faced with the writer's block, as you're saying. So how do you cope with that?
I don't think Annie suffers from writer's block.
You asked me that, yeah. I do sometimes, but because I write across form and because I used to be a journalist, like full time and then part time. So I think the necessity of writing, like if when you have a deadline, there's no point saying I have a writer's block, right? Your editor is waiting at 5 p.m. for copy. So whatever you churn out, it may be a bad first draft, but the information has to go on the page. So I think for non-fiction work, you can work like that. For fiction, yes, sometimes that happens, but I switch genre sometimes. If I'm feeling very blocked, say I'm trying to write a story, it's not turning out the way I want, I stop writing it, I go off and write something else. I'll write a poem. If the poem's not working, I drop that. I say, let's try and write a play. Sometimes that's also not working. Then I give up and I read, or I write on Twitter or something like that. But yeah, there's ways around it. Or you can set yourself exercises. The play that I did win a prize for example, Untitled One, I was blocked. There was this competition. I wanted to write a play to enter the competition. I wrote one scene and then I was blocked. It wasn't working. And I kept trying to, what if my character does this? What if my character does that? But somehow there was something in it that was stopping me. So I did this exercise, and I would encourage you all to try this exercise. It actually works, speed writing. Throw away the draft, take pen and paper, and start writing stream of consciousness. That's how I started writing. it turned out to be a completely different play. It wasn't the play that I wanted to write, but it was the play I needed to write. You know, if you stop trying so hard, sometimes the thing that needs to get out will get out. So you need to try that sometimes also. And about favorite playwrights, I mean, you can tell yours. I actually have read not enough, but I read mostly only in Hindi and English. So Girish Karnad is one of my favorites amongst the contemporaries. I like him a lot. I also like Tendulkar, Vijay Tendulkar. I've read his works in translation. Little bit more on Rakesh as well. I haven't read a lot more. Manjula Padmanabhan. Amongst contemporary playwrights, Harvest and Lights Out are some of my favorite texts. Yeah.
Can I be bold and stupid and say Shakespeare? And that is, I am stupid and I like wearing brooches. So this brooch says, where there's a will, there's a play.
Yeah.
I don't remember really because I have been a teacher for so long, but I must confess to you that being a teacher and being a theatre person have woven one into the other and have made my life extremely happy. Really, Gautami, it has been, because in the class, I would tell stories because that's who I am. And also because some of the theatre techniques that you pick up become part of you. And so that becomes who you are as a teacher. At the same time, you gain a little confidence as a teacher because you're facing an audience, and sometimes a naughty one. But then when you learn to handle that, then you say, hey, writing a play would be good, no? And then when you direct a play, you tell your actors what perhaps they need to do to become a character. You are not just you. You are another character. And some of that you learn as a teacher because a teacher has to listen. Anyway, I'm sorry if I've spoken too long. Any other questions?
Lady.
Anybody would like to say something?
I had a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, considering how prolific both of you are, how do you write? Like, do you wake up every morning and say, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words? Or do you get inspired and write 10,000 words? Or, as you said, do you meet or face a deadline and say, okay, let me get down to it? I mean, to me, that's the most interesting question that I want to ask all the writers, really.
Would you like to answer that?
You speak first.
Because I started out in journalism. I think even in college I did write, but I think back in the day, because I also lived in a hostel that was very strict. I went to a convent as an undergraduate and it was very strict. We weren't even allowed plug points in our room. So reading was the only entertainment and writing was the only thing I could kind of occupy my mind with. So I think initially it was just fun, self-expression. I wrote a lot of letters, some poetry. But that wasn't a conscious discipline. I think I just did it because, why not? But afterwards in journalism, once I became a reporter, there was no choice. You had to write every day for the paper. And then when I went freelance, I made a promise to myself because I took 1 year off from working full time. I had my first book deal and I said, okay, so are you now going to be a writer? And now that there's no office discipline, how are you going to do this? So I made a promise to myself, even if I'm doing part-time work, even if I'm doing, going out somewhere for whatever, I will come back, even if it's 2:00 in the night, I made myself sit down and write a paragraph. It doesn't matter what time. I forced myself to do it. I was working very long hours in those days. I forced myself to do it. And when I quit my job fully, initially riding on that high, I was writing I said I'll work 8 hours a day. So 8 hours didn't happen, but but yeah, I was writing 6 hours a day in those days. I was working on 3 or 4 projects simultaneously, but that I couldn't sustain that level. That has tapered off now. But now it's also become a habit. So I do write a little every day. I think about 500 words is my average. Some days more, some days less. But yes, I do write a little every day.
Gautami, it works for me, the fact that I am a member of a little theatre group. So they keep asking, what's the next play? When are we doing it? When are the rehearsals starting? So there's nothing I can do short of hiding under my chair. So I look for a theme. Sometimes the theme hits me in the face. One was, for instance, when they didn't supply water to my house. For 5 days, I had no water. And I could see these tankers going around selling water. And I began to think about Goa and the water issue. And it is not a joke. I'm very serious about this. So we wrote a play. And the play was called Who Stole the Water? And how people make money out of other people's misery. So this is just one instance. But once I decide what I'm going to write about, then I begin writing longhand. And once it starts flowing, then I write every day, not for hours and hours because I suffer from a bad back, but I do write. And my friends help with all their questions. So when's the next rehearsal? So when are we starting? It works quite well for me.
So you see, write every day. Discipline.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask just one small question. Can you share with us something about your experience of being published?
This book, or I've written multiple books, but so the first book deal is the hardest to get. The first book I was trying to put together was poetry, very small poems, and nobody wanted to publish it. And I reached out to people and heard no. It's hard no most places. Finally, I worked with an artist friend. She did illustrations. I did the poems. We did it's that size. I approached a publisher in Bombay, Jaico. They were a little reluctant to touch poetry, but I said the work's already done. The design is done. The art is done. You just have to put it out. And so they agreed.
This is a beautiful book. The way you look through it, it's really beautiful.
Thank you. So that was the first, but I have to say, people keep saying poetry doesn't sell, poetry doesn't sell. That little book, over 10 years, slowly sold. It's sold out, it's out of print. It does sell, but it sells very, very, very slowly. The second book came via a book deal, that was journalism. I was writing a lot of journalism. Somebody noticed. They said, you write well, will you do a book of nonfiction? I said, yes. I had no idea what I was doing the book about, but I said, yes first. When it offers you a book deal, you take it. That was my first, you can say, mainstream book length book that was put out there. It was a new imprint, which is useful because when it's a new imprint, they're looking for new authors. So they will do what they can for the book. That worked in my favor. After that, I've published a lot with different publishers, moving for different reasons between publishers. This one is Aleph, but I have published with HarperCollins India, I have published with Zuban India, I have published with Westland, etc. So yeah, I think once you get your first book-length book out, publishers sit up and take notice, and that is not difficult. But the first one is hard, and poetry and plays are always going to be hard. It doesn't matter, I can put 10 books out. If the 11th is poetry, nobody will touch it. So,
anyway, hearty congratulations.
thank you.
I'm so happy to have read this book, and I wish you all the best for the next
Thank you so much, Isabel.
one book and many other books.
Thank you. And thank all of you for being here.